All right. Go ahead,
All
Melissa,
right,
if you're
I'd
ready.
like to call on my colleagues here. Ian.
Ian, are you on mute?
It helps if I get the mute button off. Hi everyone, my name is Ian Brackenridge and I'm a project manager here at 1Spatial. As Jeff and Rachel have both said, we're working as a partner of Datamark to upgrade the technical infrastructure part of CAMS. I don't know if we want to do introductions. You'll hear from Melissa, who's going to give an overview of our software and our products. But I believe we have John Brady on the call. Do you want to introduce yourself, John?
Hi, folks. John Brady. I've been with 1Spatial for about 5 years now. And prior to that, I spent 10 years as the lone GIS guy in local government. And through my experience there, as well as here with 1Spatial, we're looking forward to working with you all. It's something I've been working with for the last 15 years.
Thanks, John. I also believe we have Sheila on the call.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sheila Stephenson. I'm the CEO for 1Spatial Inc.
And finally, Brian, are you there?
Yes, hi, sorry. I'm here. I'm here with on the support side of things, the infrastructure that was talked about earlier. Thanks.
So we're all going to be working together as part of the team, and I'm then going to pass back over to Melissa, who's going to give introduce herself and also kind of go through some of the technical aspect of it.
All right, thank you, Ian. And I'm Melissa Ubaldo. I'm a solutions engineer with 1Spatial, and I work mainly on proof of concept projects, but I've also led some training courses and some workshops for various some of our customers. So I feel like this is a really good experience to kind of hear from the people who are actually using it themselves, right? So just a quick introduction about us. For those of you who don't know why we're here, for those of you who don't know us, 1Spatial Inc. is a US company that is a wholly owned subsidiary of 1Spatial Group out of Cambridge in the UK. And we've actually been around for over 50 years, but here in the US, we're only 7 years old. But even with that, we've really expanded to nearly 50 clients. So the first one was actually US Census. Our projects, what our customers range from, working with addresses, NextGen 911, of course, transportation data, utilities, spatial data infrastructure projects, as well as facility and asset management. We also work with a number of GIS departments on building automated validation workflows, performing change detection and cross-validation and integration with other departments in their organization. My mouse is freezing up. All right. So for all of these different applications that I've mentioned, we maintain a rules-based approach to data quality management solutions. And this is precisely the functionality of the OneIntegrate rules engine, where you can create automated data management workflows out of your business rules. Data validation would be the simplest way to establish that baseline set of standards that you want or actually require your data to meet. And by writing out your business rules, you can create data validation workflows that can find anything that fails those rules. If for some reason, your data could use a bit of help to meet those data standards, you can leverage the quality by writing rules that will integrate it with other sources. OneIntegrate also enables you to connect across the entire enterprise. And if needed, you can also tap into spatial and non-spatial data sources in the same workflow. We find that that's specifically or especially helpful if you require multiple data sets to be maintained synchronously. And for a process like change detection, having this integration functionality allows you to customize, how different vintages of data interact and be able to automatically assign how to actually handle these deltas. And then, of course, what it uses there to finding data issues if you don't actually take the step to fix them or improve its quality. You can also write rules to automatically correct or enhance your data in such a way that the next time you run it through the same baseline data validation rules, they'll end up conforming to the data quality standard that you set. So one of the key things that I feel in implementing processes like these is to make sure that the rules that compose the workflows are kept in a somewhat controlled environment. You know, you don't need 100 rule authors editing these rules. In other words, as we always like to say, you wouldn't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen. So particularly if my role, for example, is just a data contributor, you know, I don't necessarily need to be involved in learning how to write rules in 1Integrate. So here's a solution built on top of the 1Integrate rules engine that we call One Data Gateway. It is a self-service web portal that has 1Integrate running under the hood, and it really provides that environment to share validation and enhancement processes between internal and external users. So I have a quick little animation here to show you potentially what this means for LA County and the CAMS data contributors on this call, perhaps. Okay, so to facilitate the CAMS data contributors data submission. Oh, sorry, data. Oops, I don't know if my my mouse is actually. All right, I skipped a step. So to facilitate CAMS data contributors data submission, LA County hosts 1Integrate rules on their server. So contributors can upload their data to One Data Gateway, where it goes through a series of data validation rules. So if there's some issues found, contributors can download those results, giving them that opportunity to actually address those issues themselves. And then once they've cleaned that data, contributors can resubmit that same data or that cleaned data to One Data Gateway. If the quality is at 100% conformance to the rules, one of the things that LA County can include in this workflow is to actually have it set up in such a way that the clean data is automatically delivered to their server. So it definitely, it has, what am I trying to say? Automated that data supply chain between the two different entities right there. So and with that, let's talk about the submission and validation portal infrastructure that we actually want to implement between LA County and its local contributors. So there are two main processes that we'll tackle here, with the first one focusing on data validation. And we'll be providing rule sets to help you essentially hit the ground running. And of course, we are going to workshop some additional custom rules like Rachel mentioned, including those to configure schema standardization, how do you want to tackle that, and vintage over vintage change detection. So I do want to look at these processes separately. Oh. So for our data validation piece, these are checks that the checks that we're going to share are the essential geometry checks. These are meant to identify the most common types of geometric dirt, as I like to say, in GIS data. We also have essential network checks to ensure that there's proper connectivity for our roads. And we are also going to provide the full NINA attribute validation checks. And of course, again, additional custom rules to help build a standard for addressing data and other expected relationships between our CAMS layers. So I'll be running a live demonstration of some of these rules actually in a little bit. For a change detection piece, the idea behind the process is for contributors to submit their data through One Data Gateway. We are going to run some change detection rules to identify the deltas between the existing data versus what's actually being submitted. And then based on various degrees of spatial and attribute comparisons, we are going to identify how the data has changed. Do we see a road that needs to be added, something that needs to be deleted, extended, maybe there's a change in address information, so on and so forth. So one of the steps that we want to do here is also that once these changes have been reviewed and accepted, those can automatically be applied to the database. So I guess, sorry, before I move on to the live demo, I do want to mention a use case that I'd like to highlight, which is a spatial data infrastructure project that we're working on with the state of Michigan. Their spatial data infrastructure contains more than 100 statewide data layers. This includes address points, road center lines, parcels, and administrative boundaries. And these are essentially synthesized into a single data source. And they are made available through an Esri ArcGIS enterprise data portal. So the challenge here, for it to actually be truly statewide, the city has to rely on data stewards from organizations within the state, some federal partners, their locals or their cities and counties, as well as some third-party data suppliers. And each of these data suppliers have to go through the Michigan Geographic Framework, or MGF, data supply chain to be fully integrated within the spatial data infrastructure. So we've actually partnered with the state to write out their data validation rules based on the business requirements of the MGF. And it's these set of rules that your data suppliers need to conform to before these submissions are even accepted. So the resulting integrated data then goes through a larger validation process after the change detection step, very similar to what I just described, to ensure that throughout the workflow, making sure that no issues have been inadvertently introduced anywhere at any point. So this entire process essentially enables the state to maintain their statewide spatial data infrastructure that can be shared to statewide partners. And as a NG911 implementation of this side is, well, the setup is really very similar to what I've already mentioned. The NINA rules are based on the NINA standards. They are hosted by the state using 1Integrate, and they have them wired up to one data gateway. It's going to be very similar to what I'm about to show you. And really what's integral throughout this process is that it encourages and it empowers a proactive relationship between the state and their data suppliers. All right, those are a lot of words. Not thank you yet. I'm going to go ahead and run a live demo. And what I want to start on here is kind of from the perspective of our CAMS data suppliers. Let me clear out my pen here. Okay, so this is One Data Gateway. This is a submission portal that we want to log into. So let's pretend that I've been given access to LA County's One Data Gateway instance. So I'm just going to log in. And what I'm seeing here are the assignments under projects that I've been given access to as they have been set up by the county. So I'm going to go ahead and run this CAMS data validation here as a CAMS data contributor. I'm going to go ahead and hit start a submission, and it's asking me for my CAMS input data. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop a sample of West Hollywood. After hitting accept, what's happening right now is it's trying to figure out what can it naturally map between the schema of the data that I submitted versus a schema that the rules have actually been configured to run against. So right here on the schema mapping page, it's saying here that I haven't mapped, or it can't find a class to match my address points to. So I'm going to go ahead on a target and say submit them as my site structure address points. And what I'm going to do is roll down the list of the attributes that are expected here. So what I did here, just to make it quick, was I just picked and choose which ones the rules are actually using, so we don't have to go through the entire table. So for number, I'm going to say read it in as add_number. So I have post direction here. Yep, read it in as SC_poster. Not that one. Pre-direction. Oop, not that one either. Sorry, pre-type. Post type. I think I missed post type. Street name, of course. And my postcode. So already in this step, we can see how, you can definitely, no matter what schema you've brought in, it's really up to the person who's submitting to be able to, push that in such a way that it's accepted by the rule set. So I can do here is hit apply. And one of the things that I did here beforehand also was I actually submitted roads and address points. So at the top here, what I can do is I only need to do this once. And what I can do is save the way that I've just read this schema through. And what I've done here is I already created one for my centerline schema. You can save a different mapping for your address points. And if I can show you real quick how that turned out, street center lines are mapped over as road_centerline. And again, I'm just picking and choosing which attributes should match to where. So it does try to map as much as it can on its own. But of course, there are some that can just, it's really far to say zip_L is postcode L. but you guys get the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue now that I'm satisfied. And what this does is it essentially kicks off the validation session. And again, we're looking at a CAMS data validation session set up by LA County. And these are the rules that it's asking its CAMS data contributors to conform to. So at the top here, we're seeing that it read in some data. It read in my address points as well as some street center lines. It's just a very small subset here, so we can run it fast and quick. I have 3 separate rule sets in here. These are the ones that I mentioned earlier. We have our essential geometry checks. These are the ones that have been written generically. So if you're noticing here, this ran on 3,057 features because it ran it through both of these layers. So that's also kind of the beauty of being able to have these type of rules, is that if they've been written generically, we don't have to write multiple versions of these rules for address points and then a separate set for street center lines. It is running against everything. And the way that we read these instant results is that, again, because these are rules that we're expecting these features to conform to, 100% conformance means nothing failed that rule. So anything that is not 100% means we have non-conforming features. Therefore, we do have instances of duplicate features. We have some kickbacks, and we also have some spikes. For our essential network, again, these are meant to look at connectivity issues possibly between our road network. And it says here that we do have some overshoots and undershoots, and we do have roads that are for some reason not intersected at their ends. And again, these are also customizable if it's something that needs to be worked on. And some sample addressing checks. Some of these checks are ones that we've already shared with LA County during their POC stage. So these are ones that I believe they've already seen, but just as an example, these again are customizable. We are checking that address points are valid, road center lines, do we all have valid address range values? And the term valid here, or the way that these rules have been labeled, is really dependent on you. It doesn't have to be named this way. Anything in here, especially the way that these rules have been named, the descriptions on these rules, they are definitely customizable so that everybody can understand and everybody's on the same page. So it looks like we do have address points that do not have valid number and street names because we are not at 100%. We also have a road center line with a range that does not have an address point number within the range. I'm going to show you an example of that in a little bit. And check that road center lines have no address range overlaps. And just as an example here, we just ran it on the left address ranges. So at the bottom here, I am given a copy of my road center lines and my site structure address points in the schema that they have been pushed through. So now we're only going to see, the ones that we actually mapped over for those attributes. And we have this markup class, which will pinpoint us to the 1,558 occurrences of non-conformances in the data. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue, because at the top here, what I want to show you is you can definitely download another copy of the input you just submitted. You can also download an output, which is the export that we just ran. And another thing that we can do here, and I really like this one, is there is a PDF in here. It's an auto-generated report, kind of like metrics for what we just pushed. So it tells me, how many features did I actually submit, which rules did I run it against, how did my data actually stand up to these rules, where do I have the worst issues, or where am I failing the most, etc. So if this is needed for your organization, it's nice to have this kind of information on hand. All right, so I've downloaded that. Let's go ahead and, I'm sorry, wrong folder. And I'm going to do this live. I do want to make sure that. Okay, so I've exported out what we just brought in here. I'm bringing it just to my GIS application of choice. And I've brought in the address points and my street center lines that I submitted. So what we're going to see here is, can't find it. Oh, I see. I know what I did wrong here. Give me 1 second. All right. Because I deleted the one earlier. All right. Okay, so I have a copy of my markup points, my road center line site structure address points. And you'll notice that it will only be on this area for my markups, because this is the subset that I cut through in here for the submission. All All right, and I already pre-marked some of the bookmarks here that we might be interested in, just so I don't spend too much time looking for them. So in here, we see markups for our kickbacks, and actually what would help here, if you guys can give me a second, is to fix the symbology real quickly. If not, if that's too slow, then nope, let's do it. All right. So in here, what we're seeing is that we have 3 points that we have been driven to. And in here, what we're seeing is a bit of lag there for ArcGIS Pro. All right, so we're seeing here that we have 2 spikes that are essentially creating or composing our kickback right here. So it dropped a point exactly at the vertices that are causing this type of geometric error to occur. Another one is an undershoot, so right here. And what we did here was, and it's definitely configurable, within a certain distance, are these points connected? If they're not, then it must be an overshoot or an undershoot. And right here, we're seeing, of course, that we do have an undershoot for this center line right here. Okay, let's move on to some attributes. So in here, we have a road that does not have a name. One of the very basic requirements that we have in here. And we're seeing right here that all of these different attributes are in fact null. And one of the things I noticed actually was that the road beside it, and it does have its own markup, is also null. So maybe that's kind of one of the spatial relationships that probably also need to be checked. For address ranges, I found one in here. So it's flagging this road on the left here. So let's start on the right. Is it the right one? Yep. And again, this was just running specifically on the left side. So the one on the right, it is going from 9,000 to 9022, but it continues on to be 9020 to 9098. So it's definitely stepping on 9020 and 9022 and having that, that overlapping address range in there. And one of the nice checks that I also really like if I turn on my labels here, we had this rule, and this rule is called check road center line with address range has address point number within, I still didn't expand that enough, within the range. So in here, we're just saying that if my road center line does have address information in there, I should have at least one address point that I can map and say it belongs to me or to my address range. So what we're doing here, I'm just going to grab a sample because right now we're seeing that Dorrington is in fact matching all of these. And if we look at our road center lines ranges, 8,700 to the high of 8,799 in total, these numbers do look like they should belong there. But the reason why this got flagged is because even though these full names, Dorrington Avenue, appear to be matching, what we did was we were not looking at the full name, or which is the concatenated field, but we were looking at these attributes separately. So street name, pre-mod, pre-dir, pre-type, post-type, post-year, post-mod. And what we're seeing here for where is my... for the street center line, okay, here. So the post type here for the street center line is AVE for avenue. On the address points, the post type is written as avenue, spelled out. So this is one of the things that Martha mentioned earlier. It's probably a good idea to kind of discuss how should we handle these kinds of inconsistencies if we are to mark them as an inconsistency. And one of the things that I probably would suggest is, you know, we already have it correct on the abbreviation. Maybe it's just the way that we want to reconfigure the rules so it can fit how our data actually looks like. And I think I do have another, nope, that's it. That's my only markup left. So that's the end of my live demo. We are now open for questions if there are any questions.
So I got this is Rachel Marquez. I got a private question. I'm going to go ahead and not name the city that said it, but
Okay.
whether whether the cities were going to have access to the exporting of those markups, like the
And Rachel, I think that's the plan, isn't it? That's what you want to set up so that then they'll be able to access those back after they
Yes.
drop their data in there.
Yes, 100%. So that you guys would be able to go ahead and make some updates, corrections as you see fit, or actually use that to justify a lot of your work that you guys are doing on the back end to even get reimbursed by the state, you know, for the staff time that it's going to take to clean up the data.
I know
Anybody
Melissa
other-
ran through everything pretty quickly, so if there's
I'm
any
sorry.
other questions or no, it's all good, Melissa. I just want to make sure that this might be something very new for people, and if there's
Mhm.
anything that didn't come across clearly, please feel free to speak up.
Yeah, or if you guys want to talk about some rules or some things that you know came to your mind on how you would want to use this, because there is a lot of customization that we could do to these rule sets, you know, considering, you know, what is a spike, what is a, you know, overshoot, undershoot type of things, that we could get really customized with it. If you guys say that, hey, you know, we have this scenario that, you know, yeah, we do have a 10-foot stump of road somewhere that needs to have a name and needs to have addresses, you know, we could take that into account. Or if you have, I don't remember the city at this moment, but there's a case where there's address points and those address points are assigned to a road name, but the road name that they access the house with is not the same as what the address points are assigned. So those little caveats would be very interesting to know. Yeah. Anybody have questions, comments? I guess I just saw that Brandon posted a question. What is the difference between this and map topology rules in ArcGIS Desktop? I don't know if Melissa, you want to tackle that one or you want me to.
Oh, you can go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. So Brandon, the idea and concept is that this is for bulk data uploading. So we can run it on the existing data that is there, but when cities are now submitting their new and updated data, we could run through these quality rules as they're submitting it so that they could get the report back out and then see, you know, their confidence in the data. And then we could post-process it in the back end and integrate it into the overall repository of CAMS data and push it forward. So yeah, the same thing. What's the difference between this and ArcGIS Data Reviewer? You know, it's the contribution method of the bulk uploading and bulk quality validation as opposed to existing on a desktop infrastructure-based working on those rules. I hope that clarifies it, Brandon, a little bit more.
And I think, Rachel, another point about this is that it's all of that on infrastructure and software licensing that the city doesn't have to pay for, but the county is providing as a resource to make not only the county's data set better, but for the local to make their data set better as well.
Yeah, definitely. Nobody has questions, comments?
They like that though. I see, sounds good.
I don't know. I know, Rachel, you mentioned trying to kind of spur some conversation around specific types of validations that anybody has peculiarities around. From the 1Spatial team, is there any specific things that you're looking for as far as feedback so that you can author the rules?
Yeah, I'd say that what we we do want, and I'm assuming this is what Rachel wants as well from when we've discussed in the past, that ideas on what are some of the types of rules and services that would be beneficial to them beyond just the core NINA validations, because we realize that the data that you develop, while it may be going in for the purpose from the county of being funneled up to the state for NINA purposes, you have lots of other use cases for that data. And so ensuring its validity would be maybe a good point to start. Is that okay, Rachel?
Yeah, 100%. So we had a question about how often would we be able to validate our data? And I think we're gonna leave it open, right? As long as the capacity is there and the
Exactly.
server has room, right? They'll be
Yeah.
able to submit twice a day, 5 times a day, 25 times a day if you really want.
I would say yeah, because I feel like that's kind of like the beauty of having those instant results on demand. Being able to check it at your convenience, and it definitely keeps it collaborative, and definitely keeps you proactive as a submitter. You were gonna say something, Sheila?
No, I'd say you basically said what I was going to say. I just say that really there's not a limit, at least by the software, of how often you can submit. Now, if everybody goes to submit their data 25 times a day, Rachel might say, oh, wait, because the way the system works is it's a queue-based system. So when one data set gets submitted, the other ones can be submitted, but they'll wait in line behind it. Now, it does operate really efficiently and effectively because there's some very unique architecture underpinning it, so that we're able to deal with really large data sets very efficiently. I mean, that's why we work with clients like the US Census and Federal Highways and Caltrans and LA County for that matter.
Yeah, and I think when we processed the data before, I think I want to say the whole data set took like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It was something like ridiculously low.
Yeah.
And that was on in-house servers. And now we deployed the software on AWS. So it's most likely going to be a lot faster. All right. So did you want to talk about the rules?
Anyone from my team would like to, because I think we also kind of already discussed maybe the most common pain points probably in addressing data, the most common challenges that we've probably seen.
And I see
Ian,
Michael
John.
Michael Martin's back on. I don't know if he was going to chime in on some of that as well.
If any of you guys are trying to speak, you are on mute, just so you know.
As I was leaving, wasn't sure if Michael was going to chime in. John Brady, I was going to say some of the things that one thing that we had thought about was kind of in terms of struggles that people might get of going to one schema, I guess, yeah, how their address information is stored internally. Some people have made the jump to the next gen 911 schema. CAMS, is certainly adopting it as we've discussed in some of these stakeholder meetings, but there may be a challenge of, in the next gen 911 schema, there are 3 fields to store address number information. You have an address prefix, address number, and address suffix. And then you have available to you 8 fields for street type or for your street name. That would be the street modification, the pre-street type, pre-direction. There was one more there in the pre-section. There's the street name, the post type, the post modification, post direction, and the other pre is the pre-separator. Whereas some folks may be operating at a point where they have 1 address number field and maybe only 4 street name fields. It might be limited to a pre-direction, street name, street type, and post direction. And there may be some challenges to get from one to the other.
Oops, John, sorry, I was talking on mute that time, but do you foresee that we can help them overcome those challenges through the rules?
I believe that we can come up with rules to, yes, overcome some of those challenges, or at least to alert, to say, we may have a non-conforming address string. Let's take a look at that. Sometimes just getting driven to where potential issues are, there's a lot of value in that list, so to speak.
Right.
So I think maybe the challenge here is that, we know that you guys are experienced in addressing and know the general addressing rules. Because you guys have been in the discovery sessions that we've had with the various cities over the last month or so. From those discussions, have you guys noticed any other things that you would suggest for us to build out? And maybe we could get other cities to chime in. I know one that, always comes up and, was even a question on here about the parcels, the county assessor, and the association with the APN number on the address point.
Yep, I remember that too. I can't remember which city it was that brought that up. Actually, it might have been brought up by a few. And
Yeah,
actually
it was a
just
few.
boundary issues in general, I would say. I think I remember those coming up in discussions.
Yeah. What do you guys think, or how can your software help manage the, well, in Nina speak, it's called the provisioning boundaries, but we have several cities that manage the address information for other cities. How can that be taken into account with the software, and how do we minimize the duplication of where, one city has to input the addresses for, a block away from their own jurisdiction? How do we manage that?
So John, this is you.
And I guess while he's getting off mute, that also falls into the road segments. How do you manage the, is it called abutments? Like where they need to meet at the city jurisdiction or the county jurisdiction lines?
Well, so that's interesting because that's a project that we have going on with a number of other entities, and actually at a national level, looking at a pilot with federal highways, and where they're trying to create the starting with the national interstate road network, but eventually to include all roads. And so there's a number of ways you can do that, and one of the ways is to actually get those, let's say you have two neighboring counties, and you look at the road center lines, and the system can identify where they should be a match, and like most often they're not, but then the system can automatically calculate an appropriate point based on a number of different parameters to where those two road center lines should meet. And what we're looking at potentially doing in the case of the federal highways is creating that proposal point of where those two should meet. And then the two neighboring, in this case, states, but in the case of LA County, it would be two neighboring jurisdictions, could look at it and agree, yes, that's a good spot for them to connect, or agree, no, this is where it should connect, and actually reposition that point. Then the rules engine can automate the process to tie those together. Is that what you're thinking, Rachel?
Yeah.
And so there's other use cases too. There's things like looking at, especially from municipality to municipality, how well do the boundaries align, and are there overlaps or are there gaps there, and identifying those kinds of things, and also creating proposals of how to resolve them. And again, being able to automate those processes with the approval of the jurisdictions. Or I should say the agreement amongst the jurisdictions. So John, do you have anything to add further on the addressing process? And
I was gonna, I was, looking in on the one question that was asked. I don't quite have an answer for that one yet, but I will, at least by email later. But a potential idea is in terms of, do I have a road center line that has range but no associated address point? And maybe, if I say that, hey, my address or my road has a range, I should have addresses associated with it. Maybe that would lead to a conclusion that I haven't produced those address points yet. Even though the road is there, it's been provided a range, and there may be development occurring at that location that needs emergency service if one was called upon.
And Melissa, I know you've done a number of sort of proof of concepts and also trainings around this kind of effort. Do you have any thoughts you want to add?
No, but there's definitely more than one solution for every problem. And it really, I feel like that's the value of the workshops that are included in this in the game plan that we were showed earlier. And because it matters to hear what kinds of challenges some of these jurisdictions might encounter in trying to get to, to meet a single requirement, for example. And, the more that people can actually express how hard or how easy maybe it would take them to get their data to a certain standard. There could be other ways to solve that problem, if that makes sense. Which is why, again, I feel like it's very valuable for people to kind of know where their data is at right now and how they can actually, with probably the minimum effort to get that read across for LA County for that data to be usable. Because you do want to be able to make the most out of that existing data.
And one of the other things that might be of interest too is that, and I think Melissa did a little bit of a demonstration of this, is that I know one of the concerns is the standardization of the ability to standardize addresses into a NINA format. I know, if I remember right, one of the cities was really interested in doing that, and it can be done automated through, like a permanent process, or it could be done through the schema mapping on the One Data Gateway. And then once that's set up once, every time you go to submit and validate the data, that schema map translation is done automatically. So it's doesn't need to be redone each time. So it looks like there's another question.
Yeah, can anyone or any CD share experience for collecting gated community private street information and address points? Does anybody have any experience with that? Did you guys all fall asleep during these presentations?
I bored them with my slides.
Does this imply, I guess, that the grounds are entirely private and that the city is not responsible for the maintenance of the roads, and therefore those roads may not enter into a city's GIS or street guide? Is that potentially where we're getting to?
Yeah, yes.
I know my experience was, working with ultimately there was a lot of internal policy that needed to be developed and communication channels established. And so, I knew that our planning department and our engineers were the first, folks to be aware. The engineers were receiving, digital plats. The planning department was, approving subdivisions or, reviewing them and identifying, these key moments in the land management system, so to speak. And, where does, what actions that occur trigger, some other action. And so in something like a gated community, knowing at the developmental phase, when the plats were received and approved, that was the trigger point to say, hey, I've got to digitize these roads because, you know, we will provide emergency service to them, even if we're not maintaining them by Public Works. And, you know, we had I just embedded a field. I forget what I called it. It might've just been you know, private public. I forget what I called the field, but you know, there was effectively 2 or 3 different values that I could choose. And so in that instance, I would have chosen private, you know, that these roads represent a private network. And then the addresses had a method in place where, you know, I knew at the time of development that it was coming from a large parcel going down to a smaller parcel. And I would, and once we knew that the plat was approved, that I would just assign the addresses to the master parcel. And then when the assessor's office finally, you know, updated their land records so that there was an actual parcel record, I would then, you know, after the fact, associate those addresses with the parcel. That was somewhat of a manual effort on my part, but, you know, we had the notification policies in place that I was able to do that. But we had to have those addresses prior to, because the permitting folks needed to issue permits to those addresses as opposed to the, you know, the larger parcel that those things were coming from.
Yeah, I think, Victor, you also had a question about mobile home park address, like space numbering. That can be, I've seen that be lots of ways sequential. I've also seen it be split, even odd on either side of the road, especially where they had sort of an alias name for those private roads.
Yeah, this is from our experience. So that's why I wonder any kind of idea or suggestion to work on this kind of addressing.
So that's interesting. We were just on a call this morning with the state of New York because they're looking at the same sort of thing, because with the 911 and newer requirements where mobile homes may have once upon a time had their streets on the major, whatever road it is that went into the park, because those park streets might not have been named. Now that they're being named, so they're looking at how can they automate the processes to take those named streets and street ranges that have been assigned there, and then to automate the creation of the address points. Is that something along what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I just share the experience. So probably you can provide more, you know, helpful information. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think as well, if you're talking about a space number or a unit number, you're talking about a subaddress element. It's a different story than if you're talking about each unit having their own whole address number.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what New York is doing. I think New York is moving towards that. The
sequencing of subaddress elements can be arbitrary, and it doesn't really impact that much. But if you're talking about it having a main number off of a named road, then there does need to be some coherence to how the number gets assigned.
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think this is some good conversation, and hopefully you guys will have things to take back to your city to think about and consider. I just realized that I have not posted the names or information on the types of rules that are already written that might want or need to be a little bit more customized to our specific area. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down for me to do and post it on the CAMS hub site, just so you guys have a little bit more background on, you know, exactly what we're thinking about implementing. And then you guys could bring forward any other specifics that you want, you know, that might work for your city or that you want to consider or you want to try to troubleshoot within your jurisdiction. I think that might be helpful for you guys. And then
And Rachel, one way to approach this that might be useful, it's very similar to what we do with on the transportation side of the house. We have some work that we're doing with HPMS, and we have kind of a community there. And the community comes forward and says, as a whole to federal highways, it would be very helpful if we had validations that did X, and X, right? And so then they're beneficial to the broader group, and then those get thrown into the mix of what should be provided out.
Yeah, I think we could start something like that. I see that Jeff has the CAMS hub site up.
Perfect.